Dear brothers and sisters in spiritual life, in this beautiful Bharatiya temple in Detroit, it's great that we have gathered here today. I can't exactly say it's a beautiful sunny morning. It's neither India, not even California, but for me it's been amazing. I've never seen this much snow. And one of the gentlemen here was saying that it's a special show that Detroit has put on for you, Swami. So, yes. I was told that the subject this morning for discussion would be happiness, investigating happiness. And it's very interesting to see that in recent times, in the discipline of psychology, a lot of work is now being done in a rigorous academic fashion, discussing what happiness really is and how do we get happiness. In America, there's already a big happiness industry. One of the goals of life is happiness, and a declaration of independence, I think, or I think it was one of the founding fathers' documents where it says pursuit of happiness is the goal of this nation. That's one of the things that's there. And that's very Vedantic. As you know, the philosophy of the Upanishads is called Vedanta. And if you read the old texts, they'll first tell you what is the purpose of Vedanta, what is the purpose of Upanishads. And the purpose, they say, is the pursuit of happiness. It's exactly what you find in the goals of this nation, of this great nation. That's why when Swami Vivekananda came here more than 100 years ago, in 1893, he really liked the American nation, the American ideal. The combination of freedom, and people are free to pursue their own happiness in the most enlightened possible way. Now this is a beautiful goal, and this really matches Vedanta. When you read Vedanta, the purpose of Vedanta, they say, is Atyantika Dukkha Nivritti, complete cessation of sorrow, and the pursuit of happiness, Paramananda Praptischa, the attainment of ultimate bliss. I remember years ago when I was a novice and I was reading up on all sorts of philosophy, reading up on American philosophy, and the philosophy of pragmatism, Charles Peirce, William James, Dewey. And to put it very simply, it says that something is true if it is useful. Something is true if it is useful. So pragmatism. I asked the Swami, who was teaching us Vedanta, what's the use of Vedanta and what good is it? And the Swami smiled and he said, it is the highest good. Because after all, what is the purpose of human life? We want to overcome our sufferings and our limitations and sorrows and attain happiness, permanent, ultimate happiness. So, Atyantika Dukkha Nivritti Paramananda Praptischa. And that is the utility of Vedanta. That's the highest possible utility. Vedanta promises that. You know, when Swami Vivekananda came here, he was very fond of quoting from the Upanishads, and there's one particular mantra which he liked very much, which he often quoted in this country and back in India too. This Upanishadic mantra goes in this way. I'll recite the Sanskrit, that's what Swami Vivekananda used to do. He used to recite the Sanskrit first and then the English translation. The Sanskrit goes something like this. Om Shrinvantu Vishve Amritasya Putraha Aye Dhamani Divyani Vastu Vedaham Purusham Mahantam Aditya Varnam Tamasastu Pare Tameva Viditva Ati Mrityumeti Nanyah pantha vidyate ayanaya. Very soul-stirring Sanskrit, but what does it mean? Meaning is very interesting. Somebody, in the ancient past in India, we don't know the name of this sage who recited this for the first time. He stands up and he says, by the way, when I say ancient, in India it has a different meaning, in America it's a different meaning. I was in San Francisco a couple of weeks back, and they were taking me through the streets, and there's some old buildings, and they said, Swami, some of these buildings are really old. This is really ancient. It's more than 100, it's nearly 100 years old. It survived the great earthquake and fire. So 100 years is not really ancient by Indian standards. I was thinking, a few years ago I had an opportunity to study a really subtle form of philosophy, Navya Nyaya. It's one kind of Indian logic which was popular in Bengal at one time. It literally means new logic. It's a system of philosophy. Navya means new, Nyaya is a system of logic. And I was studying that, and this new logic in India is 900 years old. So if 900 years is new in India, you can imagine what ancient will be. But this mantra I recited from the Upanishads is really ancient. By even the most conservative estimates, you could date it back to 3,000 to 4,000 years at least. And this sage stands up and says that, listen ye children of immortal bliss, children of immortal bliss, amritasya putraha. And that's remarkable in itself, because the first thing that we know about ourselves is that death is certain. We are all mortal. Everyone dies. It's an unpleasant fact which we turn our faces away from, but it's a fact. Swami Vivekananda says in one place that kings die and paupers die. Sages die and fools die. The rich die. The poor also die. The strong die and the weak die. And everybody dies, and everybody is passed away, and everybody is going to pass away. So death is one thing that is certain. And here is the sage who addresses us, people of the world, as Amritasya Putra, children of immortal bliss. That's remarkable. And he says, if there are gods in heavens, you listen too, because what I'm going to tell you is something that you don't know. The great secret of the Upanishads. What is that? Vedaham Purusham Mahantam. I have known that infinite being. There is some infinite being, Purusham Mahantam. And what is it like? If such a being exists, what is it like? Aditya Varna. Blazing forth like the sun. Sun is not doing much of blazing forth today, but like the sun, blazing forth, not with a material light, but with the light of consciousness. Aditya Varna, blazing forth like the sun. And Tamasah Parastha, beyond darkness, beyond the darkness of sorrow, death, limitation. Suppose such a thing exists, what good is it to know it? Tameva viditva ati mrityu med. If you know that infinite being, if you realize that infinite being, you go beyond death, beyond limitation, beyond sorrow. That is the promise. Tameva viditva ati mrityu med. In fact, this is the core promise of all religions. It's put in different language, in different mythology, in different ritual, but all of them say that there is something by realizing which, by knowing which, by attaining which, one goes beyond sorrow, beyond limitation, beyond death. And tameva viditva ati mrityu med. Any other way? What about science and technology, the wonderful inventions which we have got, because of which we are sitting here so warm and happy, though the blizzard is blowing outside? What about economics, the free market, or socialism, or capitalism? What about psychology? Aren't there other ways of attaining happiness? And they are very categorically, they say, Nanyah pantha vidyate ayanaya. There is no other way by which we can attain permanent peace, permanent happiness. All other ways, whether it's a science or some social system or free market or whatever, it solves some of the problems some of the time. And maybe sometimes creates other problems. But a permanent method of transcending death and sorrow, this only religion promises. And you see it very clearly stated in Vedanta. Tameva viditva ati mrityuneti. Now, you see, all of us, we want to transcend sorrow and get happiness. But how does one get happiness? And it's very interesting, in the last 20 years or so, as I was saying, positive psychology has made some inroads into this area. There's a professor in America, and a number of them, but maybe the leading light is Professor Martin Seligman. And he has been doing some good work in this area. What makes us happy? What should we do to be happy? And I heard a talk of his, and a book also, which he has written on authentic happiness. But I'll just sum it up for you. What are his findings? He's got this little equation. Happiness is equal to P plus E plus M. Is it low? Yeah. Sure. Right. So happiness is equal to P plus E plus M, he says. And what is P and what is E and what is M? He says, first of all, our first impulse when we want some happiness is pleasure. So good food, a good time, partying. And we think that will make us happy. Pleasure. Now the problem with pleasure, and here Seligman starts sounding like the Buddha 2500 years ago, or like the Upanishads themselves. He says the problem with pleasure is, first of all, it is transitory. Whatever form of pleasure we like, if we get it, if we enjoy it, the pleasure goes away very quickly. Second, you get used to it. Any one of us who studied economics, we know the principle of diminishing marginal utility. So the first piece of cake is very pleasurable. Second piece of cake is nice, but less pleasurable. And the third piece of cake is no pleasure. And the fourth piece of cake, you have to be forced to take it. And fifth piece, you're ready to throw up. Now what's happening is it's the same piece of cake, the same type of cake, but you get less and less and ultimately no pleasure from it. So there's diminishing marginal utility from pleasure. And then he says, the same thing can give you pleasure now, the same thing will not give you pleasure later on. The same thing can give pleasure to a person and it can be distasteful for another person. Pleasure is also habit forming. Something gives pleasure to us today, you need more of it, more different varieties, and that's how the economy works. The economy works that way, of getting us used to something and then tempting us with different varieties of pleasure. So pleasure has a wide range, from having a piece of cake to classical music, very refined kind of pleasures. It does give happiness, but the happiness is transitory. And here, Vedanta agrees, all systems of religion, they say, yes, that is the point. Pleasure is transitory. The great novelist Somerset Maugham, who wrote The Razor's Edge, among other books, some of you may have read it, he writes very poignantly in one place, if you single-mindedly chase pleasure, very soon you find nothing pleasing anymore. You see that in kids, teenagers who want to party, they say they'll party all night long. But after all night long party, they are all exhausted. You tell them to do it all over again, they'll run away. It's not pleasing anymore. So pleasure has a limitation. But what gives more happiness than pleasure? Seligman says there is something more. He calls it engagement. Engagement. What is engagement? A job, a career. If you are lucky enough to find something that you like and enjoy. You know, somebody said, the best thing is to get paid for what you would do without getting paid for it anyway. If you love doing something, there's a person who's an airline pilot, and he says in an interview that what I really love about this job is, even if they didn't pay me, I would still do it. I love doing that so much. But they pay me for it, so there's nothing better than that. Engagement. If you like doing something, some kind of work, and you find joy in it, that gives happiness. And that's quite different from pleasure. Sometimes it may not be pleasurable. It's a job of a doctor or a lawyer or whatever. or in a corporate world, or a teacher. It might be hard work, often it is, tiring, exhausting, but it gives happiness. May not be so much pleasure, but happiness. It could be a hobby. That's why, in fact, people take up hobbies. Hobbies take effort, but they still give happiness. And Seligman says the happiness that you get from engagement is actually much more and more stable than what you get just from pleasure. And in fact, if you look at your lives, most of your lives, the last week, if you look back, how much of it was spent in chasing pleasure? Very little of it. How many hours? 1 or 2 or 3 hours. Most of it, if you're grown-up people, would have been spent in work. At home or in the office or somewhere. So, if you can get joy, flow at work, engagement, that gives more happiness than just pleasure. And then Seligman says, there's something more, which gives even more happiness. As the third component, he calls it M, meaning. A purpose, a higher purpose in life. So, and this often involves doing something for others, moving out of the smaller circle of ourselves. Seligman himself conducted a little experiment in his psychology class. One day, he told his students, today, we could have no class, we'll just go out and see a movie. The students were happy. He took them out to a movie, and he came back and he gave them a questionnaire. You rate the happiness you got from seeing this movie from 1 to 5. 1, no happiness, 5, a lot of happiness. And they gave ratings to students. He collected the questionnaires. Next class, he said, today we won't have a class. We're going to go out to this neighborhood which is very poor, and we have collected clothes and toys. We're going to distribute it to the kids there. We're going to spend the afternoon with the kids. And all the students went out there and they had a good time that afternoon, making friends with the children and giving them toys and gifts and playing with them. And they came back and they were asked to rate it. How much happiness did it give you? And they gave some rating. 6 months later, suddenly in the class, Professor Seligman, he came out with a questionnaire and he said, well, do you remember 6 months ago, once we went to a movie and once we went out to that neighborhood with the children? Now today, 6 months later, you rate the happiness that you still get from that movie. 6 months ago you saw a movie, rate the happiness that you get from it. Most of them gave 1 or 2, some of them couldn't remember the name of the movie also. And now you rate the happiness you get when you think back about that afternoon spent with the kids. We made friends with them, gave them gifts and all. And all of them gave pretty high ratings, 4 or 5 or something. Which means it was very vivid to them. That you do something for pleasure, we do something for our own pleasure, it goes away very fast. After some time there is no joy to be derived from it. But do something for others, a meaningful activity. Do something for others. Months later, when you think back upon that, you still get that same happiness. And so he demonstrates how meaning, M, gives much more happiness, much more stable, lasting happiness than P, pleasure. Anyhow, so what's the point of this whole thing? Happiness is a function of pleasure, engagement, meaning. And if you really want happiness in life, try to find it in your work. Most of the time work does not give you happiness, but try to find it there. It's possible. See, if some people find happiness in work, I can too. What changes can I make in my work? What hobby can I take up which gives me happiness? And most of all, find meaning. You know, mothers have a natural advantage because when they have children, and the children become the meaning at least for a long period of time. It's not a voluntary choice, but once children are there, children are the meaning of life for some time. So you find meaning. Though it may not be always be a very happy experience. I was reading one of these positive psychologists, one survey they did. It's very interesting. There is a survey with working mothers. And one interesting thing, an unexpected thing they found was mothers are actually not very happy with the time they spend with the children, which is very strange because they love the children. And yet they do not report a happy experience while spending time with children. And they investigated a little more. And they found something very interesting. They found mothers love the children, they want to spend time with the children, but even when they're with the children, they're not really there. Upon investigating more closely, they found these mothers were so busy, they were either texting someone or talking to somebody on the phone or planning what to do next. And they were not paying much attention to the child, though the child is in front. Mind is elsewhere. So kind of concentration of what you are doing at the present moment. Something you like very much, but it will still be spoiled if you don't pay attention to it. This experiment was reported by a professor in Harvard University, Tal Ben Shana, a Jewish professor. He gave a very interesting talk about this. And one interesting thing is, this professor's course in the Harvard University is actually the most popular course in Harvard University. He says when he started talking about positive psychology and happiness, the first time he had this course, he had 6 students and 2 of them dropped out. And now he regularly has 800 to 900 students in his class. No course in Harvard University matches that. You can see the interest in positive psychology, interest in happiness. People want to know more about it. Anyhow, so what he reported was this. If you enjoy something, then when you do it, you pay attention to it. He gave a beautiful example. Think of your favorite song, which you love very much, listening to it. Now think of your second favorite song, which you also love very much. Okay? If you listen to either one of them, it makes you happy. But imagine trying to listen to 2 of them together. 2 songs, if you play them together and try to listen to it, it'll be a cacophony, it'll be a mess. You won't enjoy it at all. It will not be double the happiness. It'll be almost 0. Similarly, when you do something which you enjoy, which you really like, then concentrate on that. Don't try to do it with something else. 2 activities which you enjoy, try to do them together, you'll spoil both of them. Like cooking, do cooking. Like taking care of the kids, take care of the kids. And this is a general advice he gives, of course. Practically, differences. So, engagement, meaning, these give much more happiness than pleasure. Now, when I read this, one thing I was reminded of is this, that in India we have a phrase, Dharma Artha Kama Moksha. Most people know it, they have heard it, they never thought about it. Dharma Artha Kama Moksha. They call it the 4 Purusharthas, the 4 goals of human life. Goals not in a prescriptive sense. They're not saying that you should pursue these, but it's just generally what people want. If you make a category of what people want in life, you can put it under one of these 4. Dharma, Artha, Kama and Moksha. What does Kama mean? Pleasure. Pleasure. All kinds of pleasure. I want to enjoy myself. That is Kama. What does Artha mean? Artha literally means money in Sanskrit and many Indian languages. It also means success, property, even the gadgets that you have, all possessions, some attainment in life. It could be in education, it could be in politics, it could be in business. So all that is Artha. Artha. Dharma is when you expand beyond yourself, when we expand beyond the limits of our small self and try to do something for others, not just exclusively for ourselves or our family. Try to do something for others unselfishly. That is one of the meanings of Dharma. Dharma is a very wide term. Now, if you have followed what I said, pleasure, engagement and meaning, can you map it? Yeah, I think some of you, yes, you are nodding, so you can map it. Kama, Artha, Dharma, pleasure, engagement, meaning. You can see the wisdom in the Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha, that structure. What thousands of years ago the sages thought of and said these are the goals of human life. Today, in the 21st century, through positive psychology, we are more or less coming around to the same way of thinking. If you want happiness, you must have pleasure in your life, but that contributes very little. More important than that is engagement, and much more important than that is meaning or some higher purpose in life. And they said, Dharma Artha Kama. Now, interesting. When you say Dharma Artha Kama Moksha, look at the way it is said. It's not said Kama Artha Dharma, pleasure, money and meaning in life. Rather, always they say Yes, dharma, artha, kama, moksha. Look at the wisdom in that. You don't start off with a search for pleasure. You don't start off with a search for money. You start off on the basis of dharma, a meaningful life, a life of contribution and usefulness. Start off on the basis of that. And if you want kama and artha, on the basis of dharma, one is supposed to seek kama and artha. That is the wisdom. If you start off with chasing kama, often people, and you see such cases in the world, people become drug addicts because the only motivator is pleasure. People become addicts of some sort and ultimately end up unhappy. Like Mom said, if you single-mindedly chase pleasure, you will find nothing pleasing very soon. So on the basis of dharma, on the basis of meaning in life, on the basis of contribution to others, on the basis of a purposeful life, one may seek artha and kama for satisfaction. Now, this is as far as positive psychology goes, and as far as dharma, artha, kama goes. But you may say that there's one more term which you used, moksha. One more term which we use, moksha. And Indian psychology, not positive psychology, it's ancient psychology, very ancient psychology. It says not just P plus E plus M, not just kama plus artha plus dharma, but there is something more which gives even more happiness than these. Something more they found. That is this Purusham Mahantam, the infinite being which I spoke about at the beginning. Every religion speaks about that in different names. There is something. If you find that, you find happiness beyond pleasure and engagement and meaning. There is something that positive psychology has not yet come to. And that is the area of moksha, of spiritual liberation. What is that? We'll just briefly talk about it a little bit, and then I think we have time for questions. That will be more interesting, and leave it open for questions. Now the thing is, this other thing that Indian thought mentions, moksha. What is that? From the perspective of happiness. They say, there's a little story, a funny little story about a dog which had a bone. A dog had a bone, and if the dog is to, like any dog, like dogs do, it will chew on the bone, and the bone would cut its inner lip, and the little blood would ooze out, and the dog would taste its own blood. Didn't know it was tasting its own blood, and the dog would think that the bone is very tasty. The bone was an old, dry bone, there was nothing in it. But the dog would chew on the bone and taste its own blood, but think that the bone is very tasty. And then it would carefully bury the bone, go about its business, and once in a while when it wanted happiness, it would run back and dig that bone out and chew on it. And all the while tasting its own happiness, its own blood. Now, you may think it's funny, what a silly little dog. But Vedanta tells us, that's all that we are doing. This world is our bone, which we are chewing on. The happiness that we experience, fleeting though it may be, transitory though it may be, but the happiness that we experience and the happiness that we are chasing all our lives, the happiness that we are chasing all our lives, it comes from within us. It comes from within us. It's not in the pleasure, it's not in the piece of cake. The happiness is not in the piece of cake. Happiness is not in the extra bonus that you get from in your salary, in your job, and not in those dollars. Happiness is not in that award you got for being the best salesman of the year. Although all of that made you happy. But what Vedanta tells you, it is your own happiness. It's something that comes from within, not from that. That's just like the bone you're chewing on. So there is something within us which makes us, which gives us happiness. And I will say this, I will state this outright without trying to prove it, because it takes a set of subtle arguments. If you're interested, if somebody asks a question, we can go through those arguments. They say the spiritual reality within us, that Purusham Mahantam the Upanishad talked about, the infinite being, that is the source of happiness, and that is our real self. It's not just a God out there. It is God, and that God is also within us. And that is the source of happiness. It's it's misleading to think that the things outside give us happiness. All happiness that comes is from within. How does that work? You see, what happens is we have desires for certain things. We have desires for certain things. So I have desire for a piece of cake. Now what happens? Until I get it, I feel unhappy. When I get it, I feel happy. And I make the natural mistake, like that dog, thinking that the happiness comes from that piece of cake. But what has actually happened is, the inner joy, spiritual bliss of the divinity within Purusham Mahantam is always radiating forth. The moment I have a desire for that piece of cake, the inner joy, the bliss which is radiating forth is obscured. It's obscure. I don't feel it anymore. And when I satisfy that desire, the mind, that desire subsides, the mind calms down once more, and that inner joy radiates forth again. And I taste that, I feel that, and I make the natural mistake of thinking that piece of cake made me happy. I'm repeating it again. It radiates forth from the self within us, from Atman or from God within us. All the time. If our minds were calm, if our minds were serene, if our minds were without desire, we would always feel that happiness. We'd always feel that happiness. You know why I became a monk? When I was a little kid, I used to see these monks in the monastery, and I would feel that that's really weird. You know, these guys are always happy. But how can they be happy? They don't have a car like my dad. They don't have lots of money in the bank like my dad. They don't have a wife and children like my dad. My dad is not happy all the time. Most of the time he's not. But these guys don't have anything. And they are happy just about all the time I see them. Not that they are always going away with a big smile on their face. But they are generally happy. How is that possible? How is that possible? How can the dog be happy without the bone? So, it is possible. The proof of that is, if the mind is spiritually elevated, enlightened, you can be actually much happier than you are with the things of the world. And that is the promise of spirituality, the promise of religion. As the desires subside, the natural joy within wells forth, shines forth. I was just saying yesterday in Chicago. I was in Chicago yesterday. It's a very historic, it's very interesting. Because Chicago is Obama's city. And last week, week before that, he went to India from Chicago. And he addressed Indians as sisters and brothers of India. And he explicitly said, I am just echoing a traveler from your country who came to my city 100 years back and called us sisters and brothers of America. Swami Vivekananda. So you can see how history works. So we are talking in Chicago, and I mentioned what Swami Ranganathanji said. Spirituality, what spirituality is truly, is when I close my eyes, I find joy within, peace within. Happiness within. He said, when I close my eyes, I find peace within. When I open my eyes, my attitude is, what can I do for you? That is spirituality. Just the opposite of the worldly sense, where when I close my eyes, disturbance. Either I fall asleep, Swamiji, I can't meditate, I fall asleep. Or all sorts of thoughts. Thoughts which are not normally there, but all sorts of thoughts come up in the mind when I close my eyes. And when I open my eyes, not what I can do for you, what can I get from you? And that's the attitude. And we think that will make us happy. The spiritual attitude is just the opposite. Close my eyes, find peace within. Open my eyes, what can I do for you? And that makes me happy. That's a much wiser way of doing it. Let me briefly tell you, in this goal of moksha, what is the method? I'll just tell you briefly. If you're interested, ask questions, I'll go deeper into it. 4 things. Like Seligman said, pleasure, engagement and meaning. If you ask the ancient Indian positive psychologist, 2,500, 3,000 years ago, how do we become happy? I'll tell you 4 things. 1, at the level of work, what we do in life, at home or in the office. Our idea is, if I do it for myself, I'll be happy. But they tell us, the Vedanta tells us, do it for others, you'll be happy. 1. Unselfish work is actually, it gives you more happiness than selfish work. Swami Vivekananda says, in the long run, unselfishness is more pain, but it takes maturity to understand this. Number one. So, unselfishness rather than selfishness. Second, I don't know how you will take this, but it's a temple, so I'll tell you. Love the world, you will be unhappy. Love God, you will be happy. You can see a few more senior people nodding their heads. A lot of younger people looking skeptical. But love God, you will be happy. Love the world, you will be unhappy. That doesn't mean you'll ignore the world or hate the world. You see God in them. See God in the people you love, in everybody. But you have to see God in the people you don't love also. Then only that is the way to happiness. So love God, you will be happy. Second. Third, we think we are happy when our minds are active. We're thinking. Vedanta tells us you are happier when the mind stops. You see, we have hands and feet. Just because I have feet, does it mean that I have to keep running around? Not necessary. When I need to run around, I will do that. When I need to sit still, my feet will sit still. I remember once we were monks, newcomers, and the senior monk was talking to us. He used to teach us scriptures every day, early in the morning, around a little earlier than this. And he used to sit on the ground. And one of the novices, one of my friends who was also a trainee, a monk who was going to leave, was sitting like this and doing like this with his feet. Like this. You know, this shaking the feet. And this monk who was teaching us, he suddenly looked at that and he said in Bengali, "Kiyochi, what's that? What are you doing?" He got a shout. "Stop it. Why should the foot move all the time? Or any of our organs? There are our organs. If I have a pen, should I keep writing all the time? Not necessary. When I need to write, I'll write. When I don't need to write, put it in my pocket." Similarly, we have a mind. You are not the mind. We are not the mind. You are the witness of the mind. You are the unchanging consciousness illumining the ever-changing stream of the mind. Body is a series of changes from childhood to middle age to old age. It will change. You are the unchanging consciousness watching this body. The mind is a series of changes. Imagine your mind yesterday. Imagine your mind, what's the significant day of your life? Maybe the day you came to this country. You won't forget that. Imagine your mind at that time. Imagine your mind when you were 16 years old. 6 years old. And see the difference in your mind from then till today. But you are the same witness. The mind has changed and is changing. You are the unchanging witness of the changing mind. Mind is an instrument as much as your pen or your car is. You can stop it, you can set it aside for a while. Happiness lies in the silence of the mind, not the chattering of the mind. Third point. I can see some of them going, what were the first two? I forgot. That is the result, direct result of the chattering of the mind. Attention deficit disorder, ADD or something. Hear much about it in India. A lot of parents came forward, the kid has this, kid has that, what do we do about it? I don't know why it's happening, it's very worrying. I don't know if it's something to do with modern media or the internet or something, that something is going on. And then fourth, last, this is a little subtle. Happiness lies in holding on to the truth that you are the infinite existence, God, the divinity within. The world is an appearance. This distinction between reality and appearance. The truth within, Purusham Mahantam, infinite consciousness within, that is the truth. This is the radiance of that consciousness within. It may be a little difficult to get grasp, like Shankaracharya says, Chidananda Rupa Shivoham Shivoham. That is the last thing. If you focus on that, you will be happy. Focus on the changing world, you will be unhappy. Fourth thing, I'll repeat quickly, then we'll go in for question answers. 1. Level of work. Unselfishness makes us happy, not selfishness. This is just contrary to what we naturally think. It's okay for children to think that, but at a certain level, as we grow up, teenage, growing up further, try to realize this. This is called Karma Yoga. Karma Yoga. Transforming selfish work into unselfish work. And it's not difficult. Everybody can do it. You don't have to be a monk to do that. In fact, Arjuna was not a monk. When Sri Krishna taught Vedanta and Karma Yoga to Arjuna in the Gita, Bhagavad Gita, he's not a monk. He was in the midst of the struggles, greatest struggle of life. So the Gita was not taught in the Himalayas, in Gangotri, in an ashram. Gita was taught on the battlefield, in the midst of life. Second, love. What do you love? Love the world or love God? Vedanta is very clear, a little merciless there. You love God, spiritual reality, you'll be happy. Love the changing world, you'll be unhappy. Third, so that second thing is called Bhakti Yoga. Third, mind, silence of the mind makes us happy. That is called Raja Yoga, Dhyana Yoga, meditation. And fourth, that the divinity within, existence, consciousness, bliss, Chidananda Rupa Shivoham. I am not the body, I am not the mind, I am the witness, unchanging witness. That conviction and ultimately that realization, that is called Jnana Yoga. Jnana Yoga. These are the insights into happiness. If you truly want happiness, of course pleasure, engagement and meaning, dharma, artha, kama, but beyond that, all of these have their limitations. Beyond that, the path of moksha, of God realization, it tells us these four things. There is the infinite source of happiness within us right now, whether you realize it or not, whether you agree or not, it exists. It's there. That is what is shining forth in the variety of happiness that we are seeking in the world. Now, how do you realize that? You realize that by unselfish work, you realize that by love of God, you realize that by meditation and by knowledge, jnana, the four yogas. I think that's enough to go along with. If there are questions, it will be better. Thank you. Yes, if somebody wants to ask a question, just tell your name and... Yeah, there's a question there. What's your name?
My name is Sheila.
Yeah.
Please come forward, yeah.
Come forward. Is it necessary to come forward? I mean, the people will be more comfortable.
Go ahead, repeat the question. I can repeat the question.
Yeah. I think you can ask the question. Yeah.
Four things you mentioned, we all read and we kind of try to focus. So how do you get focused, whether you are doing meditation, whether you are reading a book, to practice it so that your mind stays silent, so that you are in the temple, you may be thinking of something, how to get focus in life?
Yes.
Stay focused. Yes.
Stay focused in life. A very senior Swami said, staying focused in life is no beginner's job, It takes time. The stages, he said, were work and worship, work as worship, and work is worship. Now, how do you spiritualize your life? Swami Vivekananda, in one place he says that he who runs away from the world, sits in a Himalayan cave and curses the world and wants to meditate and die in that cave, he has missed the way. He who embraces the world, plunges headlong into the luxuries and foolishness of the world, he too has missed the way. Now this is very strange if you think about it. If you reject the world, you have missed the way. If you catch hold of the world, you have missed the way. Then what is the way? He says, deify your life, spiritualize your life, everyday life. That's what Arjuna was asked to do by Krishna. When he said, I want a spiritual life, I won't fight this battle. Krishna said, you will have a spiritual life and you will have to fight this battle. But you spiritualize it. Karma, make it karma yoga. Now, that's easier said than done. In the temple itself, if you sit and meditate on God, you will find your mind flickering. If you try to do that in the midst of the ups and downs of life, it's much more difficult. So how do you do it? That's your question actually. Now the Swami said, first work and worship. At the beginning, you must have a time set aside for your puja and meditation and devotional practices. A little bit, morning and evening, and hold on to that. If you're initiated by a guru, even better. Follow the practices the guru has said. And other times you do your duty, whatever work you have to do in the world. As time goes by, it is not just work and worship, but the work as worship. So instead of just offering a flower to the Lord in the temple, when I do the work, maybe I'm teaching children at school. So I mentally think that this, my Lord Krishna has come in front of me as these little boys and girls, and I am teaching. You don't have to tell them that. They think teacher is weird. You tell them that. It's an internal feeling. And you cultivate that, and you transform your work of teaching into an act of worship, privately, in your mind. Now you've extended the worship in the temple to the classroom. And we actually do that. We actually do that. In Ramakrishna Mission, when, for example, we have schools, colleges, we have hospitals, we are not doing social work. If you ask a monk, we're doing a lot of social work. We are not doing social work. What I do in meditation, what I do when I'm reading Shastras, what I do when I'm worshipping in the temple, exactly the same thing I'm doing in the classroom and in the hospital. Same thing. In our hospital in Kashi, Banaras, there are monks who are actually engaged in medical care of the patients, and they do the usual medical care with medicines and everything. But once in a year, there's a special worship where they will actually go with garlands and incense and all and worship the patients. They'll put garlands on the patients. A very quick, small worship. But that shows the attitude. So can you convert the work? Then work is a kind of worship. Work as worship. And finally, as a process, ultimately you come to the feeling that work is worship means the whole of life becomes spiritual. Not just the temple. I gave the example of one Mataji I met in the Himalayas, just close to Gangotri. She is a follower of the Madhva sect, Dvaita Vedanta, and worshipper of Gopal, of Krishna. What she does is, she sees Krishna in everybody, or she at least practices that. And whoever goes past her ashram, lots of pilgrims go to the Himalayas, past her ashram, she cooks food for them and feeds them. And she says, Sab Gopal hai, all are Gopal. That's her attitude. So I went to visit her, and there was this little Himalayan hotel just outside. Hotel means it's just what you call in India dhaba. So a ramshackle kind of thing. Just enough for people to the dhaba and pay and eat it in the dirty dhaba. So nobody's coming there. So I went to that place where Mataji is, and I heard so many stories that, for example, some pilgrims came into the ashram, small ashram. It is tinier than maybe smaller than 1/4 of this hall. And she would cook immediately and feed them. And she was doing arati of Gopal. People came into the ashram and said, Mataji khilaiye, please give us some food. And she immediately put down the lamp. She went to the kitchen and started cooking. Somebody said, Kam se kam arati to khatam kijiye. Please finish the arati of Gopal and then go and cook. And from the kitchen she replies, Kyun Baba, yahi to aap Gopal ki arati ho rahi hai. Why, my child? This is the arati of Gopala. What I am doing now, I am cooking food for these people. So what has she done? She has converted work into worship. You don't have to be a Mataji in the Himalayas to do that. You can transfer learning to your homes and to your offices. But first, practical advice, work and worship. There must be a period of pure worship in our lives. Slowly it is converted, but we must make the effort to convert the rest of our life into worship, a private effort. Any other questions?
Pranam Swamiji, my name is Amalan, and I need your help to ask this question. Basically, I am really confused about these questions. See, I have read in Gita that human being is basically designed by limited indriyas, 3 gunas. So what is the free will?
Yes. Okay. That's a very big and deep question. But I'll give you certain answers to that. See, when you say the human being is 3 gunas, the body and the mind, indriyas, basically what you're saying is that we are limited, this body and mind, this is what we are. And Vedanta is telling us this is our wrong conception. What is natural to us, that I am this, Vedanta challenges that. You are not this. Ultimately Gita says, you have this body, you have this mind, but you are not this body and mind. Do you remember Shankaracharya when he sings, Mano buddhi ahankar chittani naham, I am not the mind, I am not the intellect, I am not the memory. I am the witness of that. I am not the body, not the indriyas. Then what am I? Chidananda Rupa Shivoham, I am existence, consciousness, bliss. Now that has to be realized. So that is our true nature right now. But we appear to be limited, identified with this body. So that is the point which Vedanta teaches us. Now, free will. Do we have free will? This thing is discussed sometimes in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. Sri Ramakrishna Kathamrita. Somebody talks about it. He says that we are just like that cow whom the farmer ties to a tree. And the cow has a limited degree of freedom depending on the length of the rope. Right? The cow keeps on pulling on the rope, trying to eat grass which is a little beyond its range. What will the farmer do? Farmer will come and lengthen the rope. So the cow can reach that. So the cow has a limited amount of free will within that range. And that will increase. That is also God given. That's at one stage in our sadhana. Those who have realized Brahmagyanis, from their point of view, there is no free will, it's God's will only. They are completely resigned to God's will. They see clearly it's God alone who is doing everything. And I'll give you just the solution from the Vedantic perspective, but you have to work it out. Because it will take a long lecture. I have given a talk on this, Vedanta and free will, but the talk was 2 hours. So I will not, don't be scared, some people went pale when they heard this. I'll just give you the essence, the idea. Swami Vivekananda discusses this in his complete works. And he says, the only freedom we have is to stand aside. In spiritual realization, there is freedom. But by that time, you have gone beyond the realm of will. Will is within this limited area. Within the body, mind, in this world, you can exercise will. But that will is always determined. There are modern researches in neuroscience which show that our feeling of free will is a kind of error or illusion. So freedom is possible ultimately. Will is something that is within limits, but it appears to be free. As long as it appears to be free, we must exercise it. Otherwise we cannot attain to that spiritual understanding. And if you want a detailed explanation, more detailed discussion, you just email me. I've got a very beautiful article written by one of the best Indian philosophers living today, a very young philosopher called Arindam Chakravarti, who is in the University of Hawaii. He gave a talk, and this was made into an article. I know about this because I proofread it. He said that we have to find somebody. He's very like a sensitive genius, so he's very careful about his articles. So he said, I want somebody who knows English and who knows Vedanta very well, who has an idea of Western psychology and philosophy and Vedanta. Such a person alone should be allowed to proofread my article. So somehow they came around and found me and they said, please go through this, because whatever corrections we suggest, he rejects immediately. So I had a chance of going through that article, 20 pages. I'll send it to you, I can give it to you by email. 20 pages where he discusses and all theories of free will in Western philosophy, all theories of free will in Indian philosophy, as well as neuroscience, and comes to a remarkable, beautiful conclusion. Very beautiful conclusion. It won't make sense if I tell you now. If you read the whole thing, it will make sense. So after the class, just ask for my email ID. Okay, somebody else should ask now. Yeah.
I have a second question.
Okay, we will come back to that. Okay, just ask the question, we'll come back to answer it.
What happened in case of when one person get enlightened? What are the things happened to him? What he experienced basically in case of enlightenment?
I will not talk about that now, but I'll tell you what to read. Arjuna asks this question to Krishna. Sthita pragyasya ka bhasha samadhistasya keshava sthitadi kim prabhasheta kimasita vrajeta ki. Oh Krishna, as you said, what happens to an enlightened person? If I become enlightened, what will happen? How will I speak? How does the enlightened person speak? How does he sit? How does he move around? How does he meditate? How is it different from me? And then Krishna gives a beautiful answer. Second chapter, the last few verses. You will find Arjuna's question and Krishna's answer till the end of the second chapter. You read that. Question, yeah, there. Please tell your name.
What do you mean by unselfish work?
Unselfish work, yes. This is my question too. You see, you know what lies behind this question? The question is, I work because I want something. If I don't want anything, why should I work? Where will the motive come from? If you want something, there is a motive. If you don't want anything, how would you? The best example for that would be a mother. The mother works for the children. She does all kinds of very boring work. Cleaning, cooking, washing clothes, everything. Bathing the child. It's mechanical work. It's entirely meant for another human being quite apart from yourself. But she does it, and she does it with a lot of love. And she does it perfectly. That's one kind of unselfish work. Only thing is, the mother limits it to her own children. If you can have that kind of attitude to everybody in the world, whatever service you can give to others, that would become unselfish work. So that's an example. I asked this question once to a very senior monk, about 20 years ago. I had this question also. Slightly different. How is it possible to do unselfish work? And his answer was something I never forgot. I'll share it with you today. This question will come to anybody who is interested in Karma Yoga. If you really are seriously interested, first thing you will think, how can I do this? So, I was escorting this old monk from the temple to his room in New Delhi. I still remember his name, Swami Sarvapriyananda. He had a knee problem, so I had to hold him. I asked him this question. He didn't answer. As he was entering his room in the evening for meditation, as he was closing the door, he just said a short sentence. I still remember clearly, looking deep into my eyes, and he said this. Disinterested work, my boy, not uninterested work. He shut the door. Now you see, if you look at the dictionary, the word interest has two meanings in English. One meaning is liking, enthusiasm. I'm interested in this. The other meaning is a motive. When you say interested parties may contact this number. Interested means you have something to gain from it. If you ask, what's your interest in this? What are you asking? Not whether you like it or not. You're asking, what's your? In Hindi they say, put it much more easily. Kya dhanda kya hai? What do you stand to gain from this? Now he said, Karma Yoga, unselfish work, is disinterested work, not uninterested work. Disinterested means, I have nothing personal to gain from it. But at the same time, I will do it with enthusiasm and joy like a mother does for her child. Not in an uninterested way. Normally what happens is if I have nothing to gain from it and I'm supposed to do it, we do it again in the Hindi phrase, chalta hai, somehow. Not in this country, it's not a popular phrase in this country, but in India we sometimes find. Not in that way. That is not Karma Yoga. Karma Yoga is doing the thing with great enthusiasm, perfection, interest and joy. And I remember a scene have you seen that old movie on Gandhi? Cinema was made, Richard Attenborough. In one place, Gandhi is telling his wife to clean the toilets. He's happy to do it for the family, but not for everybody. She doesn't like it. And he forced her, so she was upset, but she went to do it. And then he scolded her, saying that you do it and you do it with joy. Not like that. Not with her. So, uninterested work, that is not unselfish work. Unselfish work is when we do the same work with joy. And it can be done. It can be done. You have all done it for your children, and you are doing it for your children. Only if you expand it a little more. And if you try it, you will see. If you try it, you will see. Those students who went to that area where they distributed toys and clothes to poor kids, and they spent some time. 6 months later, when they thought about it, it gave them joy. That was unselfish work. And that gives you a lot of joy. Okay, so that's it. Gita Shloka. Very famous, everybody knows this shloka. Karmanyeva adhikarasya ma phaleshu kadachana. But what is the next line? Ma karma phala heturvu ma te sangastu akarmani. Do work without desire for results. Okay. Second part, don't work because you will gain something out of it. And don't stop working also. Ma te sangastu akarmani. Don't stop working. The immediate result is normally if I have selfishness and then my selfish desires are blocked, I stop working. Or I do it in a very desultory, uninterested fashion. Question? You can control the time too.
Yeah.
We run out of time.
We are running out of time.
Okay.
I just request Dr. Mahavir Ketavat to give a brief introduction about the Swamiji, because many of you just joined.
Thank you, Anandji. And what a wonderful explanation of the happiness. See, like Swamiji said, we all are pursuing happiness, and but the way Swamiji explained, in the way, see, this is a Vedantic concept, and if you, this is there in the Upanishad. Swamiji didn't even talk once today about Taittiriya Upanishad. He didn't even refer to one verse of Taittiriya Upanishad. Can you imagine? And he talked about that. This is the wonder of it. So, see, these Upanishads, like Swamiji said, more than 5,000 years ago they were written. Who wrote it? Nobody knows. When they were written, nobody knows. But as early as that I know, in 8th century, Adi Shankaracharya was the first person to comment on the Upanishads. And then in the last, like 20th century, a lot of other people have commented on the Upanishad. But if I pick up the Adi Shankaracharya's commentary, you know, nowhere near to what Swamiji talked today. And even the Chinmayanandjis, or there are so many other Swamis who have commented on these Upanishads, we can sit at home and read them, but we will not get that kind of enlightenment. So that is what the Swamiji's speciality. So let me give you a little brief. Anandji already gave it, since some of you came later. I will just repeat some of the things quickly. Swamiji was initiated into Brahmacharya in the year 1994 by the then President, Swami Vivekananda Maharaj. And then 10 years later, which is the required period for getting into the sannyasa, he was initiated into sannyasa again by the then President Maharaj, Swami Ranganathananji, whom you, Swamiji just referred his name. And some of you might have heard his discourses. He was traveling around the world, gave a lot of discourses. So 2004, Swamiji was initiated into sannyasa, and Swamiji has several positions in the Ramakrishna Order, in Belur Math and other places. And he also has a business management degree from Xavier Institute of Management in Bhubaneswar. But his most important thing is what we have heard today. Getting the Vedanta philosophy and explaining those difficult, intricate and tough Vedantic concepts into a simple, ordinary man's understanding. You see how we have understood today. So with all that, I don't want to take more time. On behalf of the Bharatiya Temple, I would like to thank Swamiji from the bottom of my heart, and we thank him again. And then one more thing I forgot to tell. Now Swamiji is going to be here in Los Angeles. He is going to be attached to the Vedanta Center in Los Angeles, which is known as Ramakrishna Ashram. And that's where he is going to be here, and I am hoping that we will have more opportunities from him. He will be visiting to Detroit once in a while, and then we will have more opportunities to get in contact with him and listen to him more. So now I will request Anandji to give him a token of honor on behalf of the temple.
I request the President and the Chairman of the temple to come forward with Prince Kaushikji.
Om Brihaspade Pariviyanathen Rakshoha Mitra Upabadamanah Prabhanjan Senaha Brahmano Judajen Nasmakamidya Vitarathanam Brihaspade Ati Adarjo Areha Dimadvibhati Kratumajjaneku Jati Dachavasarita Prajata Tadasma Sudrevanandehi Chitram.
Thank you all. Thanks for arranging this wonderful discourse. Thanks to Mahavirji and the team. For the temple announcements, on Tuesday, 3rd of February, we have Satyanarayana Puja.